Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Athletic Greens and its wonderful blend of daily vitamins and minerals. AG1 by Athletic Greens is a comprehensive all-in-one green powder engineered to fill the many nutritional gaps in your diet. I'm just kidding. Look, there are many nutritional gaps in my diet, which is why I rely on AG1 to fill them. AG1 supports your body's nutritional needs across the 4 pillars of health: gut health, immune support, energy, and recovery. It is absolutely packed with 75 vitamins and minerals. They're all listed there on the back. They combine the perfect amount of micronutrients, absorption, and taste to jumpstart your daily routine. It might look very green, but it also tastes pretty good. And it's also got less than 1 gram of sugar. So it does taste very sweet, but less than a gram. How do they manage it? Wizardry! No, it's science. It's not wizardry, it's science. Wizardry's not real. Look, I'm not exactly a fitness YouTuber. As I mentioned, there are going to be nutritional gaps in my diet, and that's why I like AG1. I have it in the morning. This is my second one today because it is late in the afternoon. But I normally have it in the morning. I have it with my coffee. I feel like it gives me the sustained energy throughout the day, which is super nice. Also, it's gluten-free, dairy-free, paleo, vegan, keto, low allergen, and low calorie. So that's nice. Most important to me are just those vitamins that I need and I definitely don't get from unhealthy diets. So look, if this sounds like the supplement you've been looking for, then you can grab your own immunity bundle. You'll get 5 free travel packs, also a year's supply of vitamin D, which I'm glad I take because I went for a medical last year and I still take this every day because they were like, you have low vitamin D. And I'm like, oh, it's because I never go outside. Handy. You can get those for free with your first purchase at athleticgreens.com/megaprojects. Again, year's supply of vitamin D, 5 free travel packs, athleticgreens.com/megaprojects, or just click the link below. And now today's video. Nothing gets the human species going quite like a really big building. From the pyramids of Giza to the Burj Khalifa, from Stonehenge to the Sydney Opera House, humanity has never been one to respectfully abide by the architectural restraints of any period of history. No. Whether in service to a god king, a nation, or just capitalism itself, groundbreaking buildings have been humanity's preferred means of collective expression for millennia. And in Midtown Manhattan, the human species has just put the finishing touches on yet another endeavor in architectural acrobatics, the Steinway Tower. Luxurious, ostentatious, and mind-bendingly tall, this new addition to Billionaires Row comprises nearly a vertical half-kilometer of apartments and amenities for some of the world's richest people. But more than anything else, the Steinway Tower is skinny. Really skinny. In fact, so much so that its width-height ratio has crowned it the thinnest skyscraper in the world. The Steinway Tower stands at 111 West 57th Street in Midtown Manhattan at the heart of New York City. A historic site, the tower gets its name from Steinway Hall, originally conceived at the same site in 1925 by the same architectural firm that designed Grand Central Station. A 10-story building at the time, Steinway Hall was where the famous Steinway & Sons piano company headquartered for the better part of a century. The site hosted Steinway & Sons' world-famous collection of pianos, as well as a period in the company's history that saw it rise to become the biggest name in the North American piano business. Steinway Hall earned an exceptional legacy during that time and was frequented by many of the world's most talented pianists and composers. By 2013, though, Steinway & Sons were in the hunt for a new headquarters, and they sold their interest in the building to JDS Development Group, a prominent firm responsible for skyscrapers like the super-tall Brooklyn Tower and the American Copper buildings. The original Steinway Hall was recognized as an architectural and historical landmark of New York by this time, and rather than lobby for its removal, the developers integrated Steinway Hall into their plans for the new building. Designed by SHOP architects who also conceived Brooklyn's Barclays Center Arena, the tower beside Steinway Hall would complement the historic site while keeping some of its architectural themes and signatures. But the developers' planned tower wouldn't be constrained by the relatively short stature or the neoclassical design, no. They were going to think big. And while their narrow city lot might have been seen as a problem by many potential builders, they were going to find a way to turn that bug into a feature. Their design was the Steinway Tower we see today, topping out at 1,428 feet, that's 435 meters, and cementing itself firmly into the category of a super tall skyscraper. With 84 stories above the ground floor, 14 elevators, and an exterior made from terracotta, glass, and bronze, the tower soars above New York City. Near the top of the tower, it tapers to a single flat edge from the south-facing side, almost disappearing into the sky behind it when viewed from certain angles. But it's the building's side profile that truly makes it stand out. Just under 60 feet wide at its base, the tower was designed with a width-to-height ratio of 1:24, making it the thinnest skyscraper relative to its size in the entire world. This style of pencil tower is nothing new. It was initially popularized in Hong Kong in the 1970s, but the Steinway Tower pushes the bounds of pencil tower design like no structure before. That's not the only record it holds either. With 46 apartments plus another 12 in the original refurbished Steinway Hall, the tower is the second tallest residential building in the entire Western Hemisphere and the fourth tallest building in the United States. And if something about that number of apartments felt odd, then congratulations, you're actually a step ahead. The Steinway Tower's over 1,400 feet of vertical height, its $2 billion price tag, and its nearly 600,000 square feet of space were built to host just 46 ultra-luxurious condominiums. The tower is a creation for the ultra-rich, with each of its units taking up at least one entire floor, including ones that, on the technicality to end all technicalities, we apparently have to describe as a studio apartment. Now, we'll talk prices later, but for a sneak preview, the cheapest studio in Steinway Tower will cost you about $16 million. Whether that's another record, we don't know, but if it's not, holy shit. With the design ready to go, ground broke on the Steinway Tower in late February 2014. To build it, they would need the tallest freestanding crane in the history of New York City, which itself stood over 200 feet tall. The goal was for it to be finished and open for business by 2017, an ambitious timeline, but nothing that the many construction workers of the Big Apple hadn't seen before. But the Steinway Tower was beset by problems and complications almost immediately. Tenants had already moved into the 12 units available at Steinway Hall just next door, and in order to avoid causing unlivable levels of noise and disturbance, the site for the tower had to be excavated manually. And for anyone who's ever been to New York City, you know just how crowded and tightly packed its buildings are, with no extra space to store anything. The materials for the Steinway Tower had to be brought in bit by bit and kept on the ground floor of the building itself until they were raised up to the point of construction. Even worse, the giant crane wasn't safe in winds over 35 miles per hour, further cutting down the number of building days available. These complications and delays led to a cost overrun of $50 million and led the investment firm behind the project to get cold feet, pulling much of its financial support. All of this was made worse in 2016, just as the tower was starting to really get off the ground when the luxury housing market took a dip. Sales were delayed, and by mid-2017, the building was at risk of foreclosure before it even installed a door handle, let alone opened its doors. The investment firm that had first backed the project was now suing the developers for what remained of their money, furious that many expensive pieces of construction equipment had allegedly been left out of the budget proposal that they had agreed to. By this time, the tower's skeleton was 20 stories tall, and when the foreclosure ultimately was approved by the New York Supreme Court, the building's investors were out entirely. This could have been the end of the Steinway Tower, if not for one minor issue. By then, the tower's first condominiums had already been listed for sale, and they'd fetched a very good price. By this time, other real estate financiers had decided to see whether the project could still have some value left in it, despite the warning signs that had spooked the initial investors into abandoning the tower. And boy, did it ever. More financiers climbed aboard the project once they realized New Yorkers were willing to pay through the nose to live there. Construction continued, and the influx of development funds went from a trickle to a stream to a flood. Condo prices increased. The ultra-rich buyers didn't seem to mind, and by October 2019, the tower had been built all the way to its peak. Over the coming years, its insides were filled in, and the resuscitation of the Steinway Tower was complete. There are, however, some asterisks to this story, and the biggest and most glaring among them was the labor practices of JDS development. The developers had expressed their stated goal to complete the Steinway Tower without the use of union labor, making it the tallest building in New York City's history to have that distinction. For the developers, non-union labor meant they could rely on workers who would accept lower pay, wouldn't demand overtime compensation, and wouldn't expect benefits for their work. But those workers often came in without having had apprenticeships or even basic safety training, and the subcontractors working on the project lacked the accountability and standards that unions bring. A number of construction accidents and safety violations on site only fueled the controversy. The building was completed without any real labor concessions by JDS, despite the concerns. Of course, if lax safety standards and poor worker pay aren't enough to do it for you, we could also sprinkle in a little bit of financial crime, because this is exactly what one of the site subcontractors was indicted for in 2018. According to the indictment, Parkside Construction shorted over 500 of their workers out of nearly $2 million in wages and hid tens of millions more from insurance companies in order to avoid paying workers' comp. Many of the employees Parkside cheated were undocumented workers from Mexico and Ecuador, making it difficult for them to seek compensation themselves in the American legal system. The owners of Parkside Construction pled guilty to insurance fraud, but the employees who had been cheated never saw a penny of the money they were owed. And to cap off the trifecta of major problems that Steinway Tower faced during its construction, a hell of a lot of things ended up falling off of it. The tight building conditions, plus its proximity to sidewalks, streets, and other buildings, made it all the more dangerous. In January 2019, the tower dropped a hail of broken glass onto nearby sidewalks after a piece of scaffolding broke loose, and a year later, a large piece of falling terracotta dented the roof of a taxi. In October 2020, high winds knocked a crane loose and showered debris over the area, and in the next 2 months, 2 slabs of glass would crash from high altitudes down to the ground. But despite foreclosure and investor panic, despite labor controversy and insurance fraud, despite so much debris falling out of the sky that it would truly only be appropriate in a Chicken Little reboot, the Steinway Tower somehow made it from vision to reality. Work on the property was completed in 2021, and just recently, journalists have gotten a first look at what's inside. Now, we'll hold off on a full dramatic reading of all of its features, but there are a few worth spotlighting. The tower's interior is modeled after New York's Gilded Age architectural styles, a relic from the days when old-school robber barons like Rockefeller and Carnegie were among the richest men on the planet. Awash in marble, black and steel, velvet, and precious artwork, the Steinway Tower's lobby is a common spaces exuding the wealth of its occupants and creators. An 82-foot swimming pool, private dining rooms, and outdoor terraces nearly a quarter of a mile above New York all complete the mood. From the outside, the building almost seems to change color as it's viewed throughout the day from varying points across the city. Between the tower and the adjoining Steinway Hall, condos go on the market these days from anywhere from around $8 million to over $66 million for the penthouse, a 4-bed, 5.5-bath duplex with 360-degree views of New York City and the surrounding landscape. Even the cheapest apartments are 2-bed, 2.5-bath spaces with 2,500 square feet of living space and expansive views on 3 sides of the structure. Every residence has at least one entire floor of the building all to itself. One amenity at the tower that its residents perhaps aren't such a fan of, though, is the swaying. Because it's so tall and so thin, it lacks the sort of structural reinforcement that would allow it to stay still and withstand high winds, so the architects intentionally built allowances into the building's frame for it to sway depending on the direction of the breeze. While the feature is somewhat standard for buildings of similar dimensions, we can only imagine how disconcerting it must be to rock back and forth by as much as 3 feet, knowing that there's a 1,000-foot drop between you and the concrete below. And for what it's worth, the building is as gravitationally challenged now as ever. Early in 2022, a slab of ice fell from the roof onto a car at ground level, injuring the driver while probably scaring the living daylights out of her as well. Next time you go to Manhattan, just make sure you take a sturdy umbrella, alright? From the people of New York City, reception has been mixed on the tower, known as anything from an architectural marvel to an eyesore to an affront to New York City's rich history of labor organization. Media and popular discussion alike are undecided on what exactly will be its legacy. Some scoff at the addition of yet more luxury condominiums to an oversaturated market and grow frustrated with the knowledge that many of its apartments will be bought and held empty as a form of speculation by international oligarchs without ever having been lived in. Others praise the resilience and innovation that not only guided its design, but somehow managed to actually get it into the New York City skyline. Love it or hate it, the slimmest tower in the world is here to stay. It's an architectural experiment that perhaps didn't explicitly need to happen, but one that notches another unique achievement into humanity's belt. Whether or not it will be surpassed, well, that just remains to be seen.